I think there's a lot going on we can definitely get into. I think a lot of it is going maybe as expected to some extent. There's a lot of opposition, not surprising. There's some good progress that's been made. President Trump has made some very different choices, even the cabinet, the people around him than he made the first time, people that have a much more focused intentionality. Overall, I would say that there's very good progress being made. It's not as quick or as much, maybe not even as significant in some areas as we would like. And it's because there's people, some on both sides of the aisle, that are not totally in favor of the president's agenda, that are delaying, stalling, and slowing the process of what he's trying to accomplish.
Welcome to the Creation Today Show, where we bring together interviews with experts and solid Bible teaching. Your host, Eric Hovind, affirms the ultimate authority of God's Word, the truth of creation, and why it matters to you.
What if America isn't dead, but it's just kidnapped? It's been kidnapped by bureaucrats, gagged by the media elites, and locked in a Washington closet guarded by the alphabet agencies and rainbow flags. Guys, today on the Creation Today Show, we're not just peeling back the curtain, we're gonna be ripping the curtain clean off the wall. Forget the cable news sound bites. We're talking about the real State of the Union today, the one that's been written not by pundits, but by providence. Now, while the headlines scream chaos and collapse, something radical is actually happening. Leaders are actually rising up. Borders are being fortified. Energy is being unleashed. And the deep state, it's starting to sweat. It's a little bit scared because promises have been made and promises are actually being kept. I know, a real shocker to most of us. To guide us through a conversation on America's reawakening is a man that knows history didn't happen with a TikTok account. It's Tim Barton from Wall Builders Ministries. He's the president of Wall Builders, a ministry that is really pounding the nails back into a broken framework of biblical values and constitutional truth, where he's driving really headfirst into the fight for faith and freedom, talking about the spiritual spine behind righteous governance. The war on wokeness, the rise of the patriots and the patriot pastors out there, and the undeniable truth that nations, like men, either serve God or they serve, well, someone else. So buckle up, guys. You're not going to want to miss any of this. This is going to be really good. It's not a Sunday morning soft serve sermon. This is bold, it's biblical, and it's the real State of the Union. So my friends out there on social media, don't forget to hit those like and share buttons and follow buttons if you will. That's kind of one of the best ways you can slap the woke media in their face, is by sharing great content. If you're new to the Creation Today Show, I'm your host, Eric Hovind, and our ministry exists to disciple the world one soul at a time. And today, that soul is you. Our mission is simple: take the stumbling blocks that keep people from seeing Jesus as the creator and savior and flip them into stepping stones on your journey to the truth. That's what Creation Today is all about. So we build this community of truth seekers and disciple makers and culture shakers, seekers, shapers. I'll get my right word there, shapers. If you want to help us change the world while growing in your walk with Christ, come on over to creationtoday.org and join us by becoming a partner. Let's explore Creation Today, guys. My guest is none other than the president of Wall Builders, Mr. Tim Barton. He is a genius when it comes to history. You could say he was born and bred for such a time as this. I listen to the Wall Builders podcast as much as I possibly can because they are always on the front lines. And I said, Tim, would you please come give us a very real look, an honest look at the State of the Union. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Tim Barton. Tim, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, good to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
I love what you guys do. I don't know how hard it is to keep up with everything going on, especially over the last, how many days into the presidency are we right now? Do you know?
No, I can look it up. Trivia, I was not ready for it.
Like are we at 200? Have we broken 200? I was trying to think, we're somewhere in there, and I'm just like, Rick Green is the one who's always got that on your podcast. We're day number, and he just says it right there. I'm like, that's pretty good. How are we really doing, bud? How are we really doing as a State of the Union? What's going on, and how many different things should we talk about here?
Well, I think there's a lot going on we can definitely get into. I think a lot of it is going maybe as expected to some extent. There's a lot of opposition, not surprising. There's some good progress that's been made. Also, not surprising for us. We expected some of this to be made. President Trump has made some very different choices, even the cabinet, the people around him, than he made the first time. People that have a much more focused intentionality to some of what they are doing. So overall, I would say that there's very good progress being made. It's not as quick or as much, maybe not even as significant in some areas as we would like. And it's because there's people, honestly, some on both sides of the aisle that are not totally in favor of the president's agenda, that are delaying, stalling, and slowing the process of what he's trying to accomplish. But overall, we have taken a step back from the ledge, and maybe we are turning just ever so slightly the trajectory which is needed for us to survive going forward.
I still can't imagine. I saw a man yesterday, a Spanish individual on Instagram, I think, declaring he's so glad somebody's giving him a hard time about Trump. And he's like, can you imagine what it'd be like with Kamala right now? Can you if you're only worried about the deportations and that's your one, caveat to why we should have Kamala, like you're not looking at the full picture. So give us some of the details of what's actually happening and what we wish was happening and what still needs to happen to find out how far back off that edge we've come.
Yeah, so some of the things that obviously are happening with the closing of the southern border to a large extent, with ICE working to deport the most significant criminal aliens, and this is a big deal because the conversation today is that they're removing these families and they're doing things to innocent individuals. That's certainly not the focus of ICE. If you look at who is largely being targeted and deported, these are the criminals, the ones who have done often heinous, violent crimes, multiple repeat offenders, and some of them that have been deported multiple times that just came back in through an open border. So whether we talk about the border being secure, the deportation of the violent criminal offenders, we can look at what's going on in the DOJ. We can look at what's going on with the FBI. Obviously, some concern and issues. However, one of the good things they've done is they have targeted a lot of individuals that have done human trafficking in the United States. There's international things going on as well, but the fact the FBI is saying we're going to crack down on people that are doing human trafficking under the Biden administration, which was also Kamala Harris, more than 300,000 children were lost when they came across the border. And this is also one of the big deals when people talk about that the Trump administration is trying to break up families. So much of what they're communicating with this, there were children coming across the border with adults and their DNA did not match. And so the idea that these were the children of the adults, not correct at all. And there certainly was smuggling of drugs and humans, the human trafficking aspect. And at this point, I was recently with the Tim Tebow Foundation, and they fight against human trafficking as well. Jaco Booyan's ministry, that there's a lot of organizations focused on stopping the human trafficking. And what they've identified is there are tens of thousands of like massage parlors that are not actually massage parlors. And they're finding some of these individuals that had disappeared across the southern border. They're finding them in these places where they have been human trafficked and then being used in very evil, demonic, wicked ways. And so the FBI is finding and rescuing some of those girls, is actually arresting the people that were involved in this human sex trafficking operations. Again, we can go down the list. There are very, very good things happening. Things that should have been going on regardless of who the leader was, regardless of who the president was, but it was so clear the political agenda and motivation of certain sides of the political aisle, if you will, that they saw things that were more advantageous for their political future and career. And so they decided the Biden and Kamala administration thought it's better to leave the border open. It's better that we don't talk about this. You see the media being complicit in so much of what happened because they didn't report on it. Of course, as they said, Biden is the sharpest he's ever been, right? So much that we look back now and realize they were flat out blatantly lying to the American people, right? There was a great cover up, and more of that is now being exposed. There's still a lot of questions. There's a lot of work for the Trump administration to do. There's Actually, obviously, some question marks we have of how they're handling certain things. The Epstein client list not being the least of them. But I would say overall, as you look at the Trump administration, they are taking significant steps in the right direction. It's just that they were given a mound of a mess to sort through. And sometimes when you're going through something that large, right, it's like eating the elephant. You're like, there's no way we can do this. How do we navigate it one bite at a time? And the Trump administration is definitely taking those bites out of the elephant, so to speak, and they are making some good progress in areas.
So we've seen some things happen really fast. Border wall day one, other things like boom, 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 regulations. When you say all that list and you talk about the sex trafficking, which I'm kind of blown away. I had not heard the over 10,000 massage parlors that were not massage parlors. And you're talking that's here in the United States.
Correct. Right now, the United States is the number one destination of human trafficking and sex slavery. And it's not just because of the last 4 years under the Biden-Harris administration, but certainly that is what enlarged it to the extent it has been. And one of the most heinous evils that can happen in the world is actually happening here in the United States. And far too many people are complicit in it. And we don't need to get into kind of the horrors of what that is. That would be a different podcast for a different day. And maybe there's some even other guests that would be good to have on to do a deep dive into that. But the bottom line is, yes, the United States of America is participating in one of the greatest evils of our time and generation. But fortunately, there are now some leaders in place that are actively leading fights against this. In fact, one of the conversations coming from the Trump administration is that Congress under the Constitution has the power to open and create new courts. And they're talking about opening and creating courts specifically that target human traffickers and human smugglers so that there can be a quicker process to justice for penalizing those people that have done these evil things. Because right now, the way the justice systems work is you might be in jail for years before you go through the whole trial process, before there's convictions. And they're saying, no, when we have caught these human traffickers, human smugglers in the midst of doing this evil, there should be swift justice. And creating these new courts would create an avenue where instead of having to, wait hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lists down the docket before this can go to trial, before this can go to court, when you have specialized courts, if this is what they do, it can speed up that process to help justice come quicker for those innocent victims.
I need one of you guys to put in the chat. I think I'm here in Florida, so we're in another great state of the union, praise God. And I think DeSantis just passed a law, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, where if you're caught in that type of thing, he's saying, hey, we're allowed to use the death penalty on you for anybody under like 14 or something like that. I remember seeing something like that on the news or on a feed. I don't know, are you familiar with what he did there? Do you happen to know that?
Yes, I'm not familiar with the wording of the law as it was finalized, but that was something they definitely addressed, saying that this is a death penalty crime. If you are caught smuggling sex trafficking of children, death penalty, and maybe a swifter death penalty. So totally applaud that, by the way, right? As we talk about the dignity of human life and those that perpetuate the greatest evils against children, if anybody's worthy of the death penalty, it would be those people. And so the fact that he's doing something to try to place the highest level of penalty for what we would and should consider some of the greatest violations and evils in our time seems like a very good thing. And I do know they took steps. I don't remember the exact wording of that law, but there was a law along those lines that was passed.
Do we know, Tim, how we know that we hear the term deep state? Do we really have an idea? Do you think Trump knows exactly who, not just what? Because for me, it's almost this ethereal, there's something out there and we know maybe some of the players. Do you think he knows who he's really against here? Or and I guess even spiritually, ultimately, that this is God versus Satan? I mean, how much do we know about that? What's really going on?
Yeah, so I think the challenge is that he knows some of what's going on. And the more he seeks to root out corruption, the more he's discovering how much is there. It's something when you look, for example, at Kash Patel and Dan Bongino being at the FBI, from the outside, we would look and go, I think both of those are men of integrity. They're men of character. They're pursuing justice. And we look at some of what's happening and they're being foiled at times along the way, where Dan Bongino, I don't know, maybe it's a month ago now, or several weeks ago, where he talked about they found a room where stuff was piled and stacked up, and it was kind of like hidden, where it wasn't documented, which generally when you get evidence in, you're supposed to document it. It's supposed to be digitized so that people are aware and familiar with what's there. And they were not digitizing what was there. And they had it in boxes, they had it in cases. So it was kind of hidden from them. And he says, look, we just found this. And part of it's what happened under the Biden administration, things going back to the Obama administration. And the reason we bring this up is because as you're talking about the deep state, there are so many layers, right? It's like peeling the onion back, like, hey, we took care of this one. Oh man, there's more there. And so there is a deep state. And the deep state is just the people that have been entrenched, the bureaucracy, the unelected officials that are part of government positions. They have government jobs, and some of them have been there for 15, 20, 30 years. So they feel very comfortable in doing what they are doing because they've been doing it now for decades. And they're used to being the ones in power and control. And it is fair to acknowledge, as we look at the constitutional republic that we live in, when the founding fathers set up the constitutional republic, there was three branches of government. You have the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. The founding fathers explained in the Federalist Papers that the legislative was the most powerful, the judicial was beyond comparison the weakest. And so you do have a hierarchy. Legislative is supposed to be, has the most control and power. And then you have the president and then the Supreme Court, or courts in general. Like that's the way the kind of slope slides down. But the reason I bring this up is because Congress is supposed to have the most power. But if you look at Congress, a lot of congressmen don't have any idea what's going on in DC. And because in Congress, you're elected every 2 years, the Senate is every 6 years, there are people that have been working there for 20 years, for 25 years, and they see these new congressmen coming in, and they're like, these guys don't know what they're doing. We'll just solve all the problems. And so they have usurped power and authority, thinking this is in the interest of the nation, right? This is for the good of the people, that we will take over, we will make decisions because you, Congress, are not smart enough, you're not educated enough, you're not informed enough. We will solve the problems. And this is really a progressive thought and idea, right? It's what we saw in education. When the PhD program enters into America, and you have this really kind of the beginning of the 20th century where the PhD program comes in and becomes accepted in America. And the idea was, but before that, you could get a college degree, and we did have a master's program to some extent, but there wasn't a PhD program. The reason that started is the idea was that we need experts in these various areas that can tell us what we should do and how we should do it. And I say that because these entrenched bureaucrats, unelected officials, and these government agencies, they consider themselves the PhD. They consider themselves the professor, the ones who are wise and all-knowing, and they need to solve these problems. And so they do it in spite of or against, at times, the wishes of the president and the wishes of Congress. And this is what the deep state is. People that are trying to make decisions based on their own perspective, on their ideology, on their worldview, and often on a very Marxist progressive worldview. So very contrary to even the American foundation, the American ideals, and certainly contrary to the president. That's what he's discovering, is that at every layer of government, there are people fundamentally opposed to what he's wanting to do. And their vision is not, I'm here to serve the commander in chief. Their vision is not, I'm here to serve the American people. Their vision is much closer to the idea of, I am the zookeeper and all of you people are the animals. And so I will do what's best for you. I will be in charge. I will solve all these problems. And President Trump is looking, going, this is crazy. We shouldn't be doing X, Y, or Z. But those are the layers of bureaucracy in the deep state he's navigating with, people that have a fundamentally different worldview, opposed to oftentimes the very ideals of the constitutional republic. And so it's not as simple as replacing the head of an agency, which, again, it's part of what he tried to do in his first term, and it did not work well at all. He's now realized it's much deeper, but he's still realizing it's even deeper. And maybe he's not realizing in the sense of like it's totally shocking to him, but realizing it of just how hard this battle is going to be to win, because the vast majority of the people that are living in Washington, D.C., that are part of these agencies and bureaucracies, have a worldview fundamentally opposed to a constitutional republic, to the inalienable rights idea laid out by the founding fathers, and certainly to the president's agenda.
Are politics more complicated today? I mean, I'm thinking 20 years ago, I really didn't know a lot. Maybe I still don't know a lot about politics, especially compared to you guys, but is it more complicated now? Because it seems to me like I'm going, whoa. This is, when they talk about 4D chess and Trump's playing 4D chess, I'm going, there are so many layers. Was it that way back then under Reagan, say, and it's the same now, just I see more of it? Or is it like, no, it has gotten more complicated and more nuanced?
Yeah, I think it's definitely gotten more complicated. I think part of the question also depends on how far we go back. I don't think it was this complicated back under, for example, George Washington, because even though you did have differences of opinion, Washington is a really great one to point to kind of understand part of what happens in politics is a reflection of human nature. And human nature, because we are all fallen, because we are sinners who need a savior, none of us are perfect. And a lot of times we can agree about some fundamental principles or fundamental truths, right? Like what Jefferson wrote in the Declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Well, there was truth they all agreed on, but then there was a whole bunch they disagreed on and argued about. I think that is fundamentally true. But going back to George Washington was the only president ever elected unanimously through the Electoral College process. Like every electoral vote was cast for George Washington. That's never happened since then. The closest was James Monroe, but really it's never gone to what George Washington had, and it really hasn't even been close except for James Monroe. The reason I bring that up is Washington, you would think, is the guy that would have the most support, the most unanimity of vision, thought, understanding in his administration. At the end of his second term, his administration fell apart because you had John Adams, who supported some of what Washington was doing, but then you had Jefferson and Madison and Hamilton who were like, we totally disagree. And part of this was a disagreement over his inactivity and what he even wrote in the farewell address, his position of disinvolvement from, for example, the British and the French. And this is one example, but there were people saying, hey, without the French, we couldn't have won the revolution. We wouldn't have become a nation. And then there were people going, yes, but now we are friends with Great Britain again, and we should not support France against Great Britain. We need to be friends with both of them or friends with Great Britain. And so there was enough disruption that Washington's administration actually broke up at the end of his second term. And I say this because in politics, there's always going to be disagreements. Where things have more fundamentally changed in our era, I think you could go to a couple of things. You could point to Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson is the one who kind of introduced the political axiom of to the victor go the spoils. The reason I say that is when Andrew Jackson was elected, he was the first president that began appointing people not based on their competency, but based on their loyalty to him. And what we often have seen in politics is that, especially since Andrew Jackson forward, is presidents would begin giving positions in the cabinet to some of their biggest campaign supporters, right? Some of the people that were doing the most work to help them get elected, they would honor them with that position. And if you go back before Andrew Jackson, every single presidential administration, and granted there were only 6 leading up to Andrew Jackson, but still, from George Washington and John Quincy Adams, all of them would choose people that were competent in those positions and who would do the bidding on behalf of the American people and do things most beneficial for America. And so every president had people in their cabinet, in their administration, who had different political variations from what they supported. Andrew Jackson was a guy who said, nope, it's all my team. And really, it's also fair to point out when he was in the U.S. Senate and they were recruiting him to be president, he actually acknowledged, he said, I wouldn't be a good president. He said, I was a great general, but I was made for war. I wasn't made for politics. That's very telling because when he became president, he ran the presidency like a general, that I'm going to crush my enemies. I'm going to crush the opposition. And so it fundamentally changed part of the idea of what happened for political leaders, for government administrations. When you come forward late 1800s, early 1900s, you have the progressives come in, and then it introduces thought of we need people that are smart, that can solve all these problems. Woodrow Wilson was a former president of Princeton University. He was in governor of New Jersey before he became the president, but he was viewed as this really incredible academic. He was the hero of the progressives. So there were several things we can point to historically where there were significant shifts that led to where we are today. All of that to say, politics has only become more complicated and convoluted because we no longer have as clear of an ideology when people say, right, raise their right hand and they're going to swear to uphold and support the Constitution of the United States. There's now a whole slew, I would even argue the majority of people in Washington, D.C., that don't believe the Constitution is a good document. And so when they swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States, they actually don't even like the Constitution, which means in their mind, they're just saying the words they need to say, but they're not going to support the constitutional republic. They're not going to support the separation of powers. They don't support checks and balances. They have very different ideas, and it's promoting an agenda not aligned with the Constitution, but aligned with a political ideology. And again, part of that starts with Andrew Jackson. It's increased through the progressive era and progressive movement through the early 1900s up through FDR. Then you have increased thoughts of what happens with LBJ, the war on poverty, the expanding of the welfare state, et cetera. There's a lot of things that have significantly impacted the way politics operates today. All of it, again, confirming it's way more complicated because the waters are a lot muddier today than they used to be in early America.
We are 7 months in right now to a 4-year presidency. How far? I only got a couple minutes before I got to let social media go. So give me 2 minutes on how far we've come and how far we need to go and how far you think they'll get in the next 3.5 years.
Yeah, so I think good progress, again, has been made in a lot of areas. If you look at the big, beautiful bill, one of the things that's quite misunderstood, you have a variety of opinions from conservatives that he didn't go far enough. There weren't enough tax cuts. Again, Elon Musk, one of the reasons he wanted to bail out, allegedly, is because they weren't serious about tax cuts. One of the challenges, Mike Johnson as a Speaker of the House, it's not that he's not a conservative speaker. It's that he barely has a majority, and he has to have an entire unified Republican body. They're not totally unified. And I say that because when we talk about how much they've done and how much they can do going forward, a lot of it's going to rely on what Congress is able to do. And with them having such a slim and narrow majority and the midterm election coming up, what's historically normal is the president who wins the election loses the midterm to the other side. So generally, if there's a Republican president, Democrats would win Congress in the midterm election and they would control the House. Well, if Democrats control the House, President Trump's going to have an incredibly challenging time getting any of his agenda done on a large scale because he needs congressional support. Similar with the Senate, he needs to maintain the Senate. And unfortunately, because some of what happens in the Senate with the cloture rule, with the filibuster, you actually have to have like 60 votes in the Senate to get some things done in the Senate. So he has a challenge, and a lot of what determines how successful he'll be going forward is what happens in the mid-year election. But it's very possible that next year you'll see some interest rates come down. You'll see the economy doing even better. You'll see more American pride, people celebrating the 250th anniversary. All of those, I think, are positive for President Trump, giving him a chance to do things that encourage more people, which actually could give him a better showing. But if he does not, if Republicans don't win the midterm elections, he's going to have a very challenging time carrying forward with his agenda because he is limited what he can do from the executive branch. And I actually do appreciate, as much as Democrats accuse him of being a dictator or Hitler or whatever else they accuse him of, he's actually been very constitutionally sound in limiting himself to what the executive branch should be doing. He's one of the most constitutionally based presidents we've had, maybe since Calvin Coolidge, contrary to what Democrats say about him.
Wow. I hadn't heard it put that well from a conservative perspective. So that's exciting to me. I'm very thankful for that. Now, listen, I know everybody out there, I know what you really want. You ultimately want a country that honors truth, that protects freedom, and that reflects the biblical values that we hold dear. We know it, man. I love wall builders for standing on the authority of Scripture, saying this is the foundation where America got its idea of freedom and all this from, and ended up creating this great experiment now that we call America. But we're also dealing with this culture that has drifted from truth really radically, and a government that's often hostile to faith, and a media that refuses to tell the real story of what's going on. And it feels like the voice of righteousness is being drowned out. And I know what that does. It makes us feel frustrated. I many times, I feel powerless. You probably feel powerless. What could we do? And sometimes anxious about how our children's future is going to look. What kind of country are they going to grow up in? And honestly, that's wrong. But there is good news. We are not alone. We're not without hope. We have helped thousands of people stand boldly for truth and grow in their faith and encourage people to engage in the culture, be courageous. And it's because we care. We care about you. I care about my kids. You care about your kids. We care about the future. And we know what it feels like to want to do something, but not know where to start. So I want to, right now, before I got to let social media go, let me just tell you guys how to begin. Number one, you need to get involved with and support ministries that are on the front lines, just like Wall Builders, okay? You can find them wallbuilders.com or .org. I keep forgetting. Or is it both?
Wallbuilders.com.
Wallbuilders.com. Okay, wallbuilders.com. You need to go there. They are restoring America's foundation with biblical truth and historical clarity, as you just heard. Here's what really happened in history, not a rewritten history like the kids are getting today. I'd also encourage you to continue in educating yourself with Creation Today resources on science and scripture so that you can understand how they go together, because that's a whole other big war. Wall Builders is battling what really happened with history. In the next segment, I want to talk to Tim about how can we help the science that's been taken away from the foundation of God's word and get back to some of the truth of that. And by helping with Creation Today, just watching and sharing the program, you can continue to equip yourself and equip others with solid truth and gospel-centered resources. And above all else, honestly, you personally sharing the gospel. We have tracks, we have resources to help it make it easy for you to share your faith. The real battle isn't just political or cultural, it is spiritual. And the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. So it is the ultimate solution to every single problem that we've discussed today, the gospel. So here's what you need to do, and you need to do this today. You need to pray boldly, you need to give generously, and you need to speak truth without fear. As a Christian, you have the truth. Let's get involved, because as Tim was saying, hey, battle's not over. It's actually, it's probably heated up even more now because so much is being exposed. And if you don't, the next generation is going to grow up in a nation that no longer knows God or values freedom. And we do not want that. We want to see revival. We want to see families strengthened. We want to see truth proclaimed, and we want to see our nation turned back to God. So please, I guarantee you, if you listen to Wall Builders much, you'll hear testimony after testimony of people who came to understand the truth because of what their ministry proclaims. So I encourage you, go to wallbuilders.com, check out everything they do. And for those of you ready to stand strong, make sure you start partnering with Wall Builders and Creation Today to make a difference in this world. Your partnership is what allows these ministries and the message to go out and equip believers to challenge culture and lead people to the gospel of Jesus Christ. I want to thank you guys for joining us, all of you on Facebook, our podcast listeners, YouTube, all the social media platforms, and our television audience. Thank you guys for peeking into the Creation Today community. If you want to join us for the rest of the show or all of our content, please come to creationtoday.org, partner with us. And when you help us share the gospel around the world, we give you access to every single thing we do. So whatever you want to help us, however you want to help us get the gospel out, we would love it. You can do that at creationtoday.org. We'll see you next week. Got a great show for you next week, by the way. We're going beyond evolution. What's next? The evolution worldview is dead. It not just is dying, completely dead. And it's going to be replaced, I'm so excited about this, with a God-centered, God-glorifying perspective on biology. We're going to have the president of ICR on next week's show, Dr. Randy Galuza, and you're going to love that conversation. Until then, please go share the gospel with someone who needs to hear it. God bless.